I'm gonna cut out. Sorry, Steve Cotter. It's kind of like the old joke about the bass solo or the drum solo,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. What, Steve? Uh,
Sorry.
yeah.
Okay. All right, here we go. Hi, everybody out there. Yeah, it's a good day. Let me just turn on my fan so I can breathe a little. Other than that, Everything's fine. My guest today is the wonderful person, humanage, Joey Sellers.
Hey,
Hi,
Kathy.
Joey. I always explain to somebody who doesn't know you. I start by saying quirky, and then I have to change my mind, and I'm like, no, he's not really quirky. His music is quirky, but he's not actually. Brad Dukes is quirky. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah,
And his
and his and
cute.
his music is quirky. Yeah,
Yeah. But and actually, that particular piece that we heard was not that quirky. Um, but I have heard you in extremely quirky situations before.
yeah. Well, with that, it's interesting with that 11-piece band. Like many of us, I'm involved in a variety of projects, but I started that instrumentation when I was 17 or 18 years old back in Tempe, Arizona, where I was, growing up, and it's kind of a weird vehicle for me because I've had it for so long, and even seeing that video, which is from some years ago, and the guys that have been in the band for a long time, like Trey and Wayne Bergeron and Jerry Penner, and it's just interesting because that's one of the older songs I wrote. I'm 58 now. I think I wrote that when I was in my 20s, maybe my mid or late 20s, and every time I say, well, let's not do that. The chart's called Examino 735, and I said, let's not do that. And other guys are, no, we have to do it. So it's become kind of a thing now. It's like the theme song, and it's interesting to me because I don't tend to write like that anymore, and yet I think that particular vehicle still works, no matter how many times we play it. Cats seem to always find something new in there, which is very helpful.
Yeah,
Someone like Kim who's played it a bunch.
yeah.
Um, and I should give some props out to Cotter, even though we had to cut off his solo, because that particular book is a piano book, and there's no piano at that club. That was Typhoon, I think, and
Yeah.
so we often would use a guitar player, and Steve always did a great job. Man, it's hard. It's such a pianistically oriented book, and the normal pianist in there is Kei Akagi, who's been right from the beginning. He's been there since
Oh,
I moved out here in
really?
'86 or whatever,
Wow.
and he will not play a keyboard. After he was finished with Miles Davis, he will not play a gig unless it's a real piano. So it's either guitar or a keyboard with someone starting.
That's funny.
It is
Kayakagi, yeah. He used to, God, well, he used to live in LA and in the
yeah,
older days. We
Eagle
played
Rock.
together, yeah. Yeah.
He's
Uh,
wonderful, man.
he is wonderful. Really a great player.
Yeah.
Jeff Elwood is here, and he says that you're one of his favorite people and musicians.
Oh, thank you, Jeff.
And Andrea Wolper.
Oh, hey, Andrew.
So, um, you've been at Saddleback College for a long time, right? Pretty long.
We moved back here to take that gig in 2002. So we're coming up, this will be 18 years, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been good to me. It was really a big adjustment for me. I mean, I was a freelancer until I was 37. And then I took a teaching position at Northern Illinois University, which is in DeKalb, Illinois, which is about an hour west of Chicago. And I was really gratified by it. But my wife, we had a place in New York, and she was fine. We moved to Chicago from New York, or DeKalb from New York. But we're both from Arizona. My wife and I have known each other since high school, and we're both from Tempe, Arizona. And she just said to me one day, I can't say exactly what she said, I don't think, but she said, "This is like living on Mars, in here. I could do New York cold, but not Chicago cold." And she wasn't, we had two young kids at the time. That's where our son was born. And she wasn't vibrating particularly well with some of the Midwestern mommies
Yeah.
vibe wise, So, and it's just tough when you have two young kids, and I was still on the road a little bit, plus getting used to being a teacher in an institution, which is quite a learning curve.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny because my son was born in DeKalb, Benny, and a couple years before that, our daughter was born in Manhattan. And so she's constantly teasing him because when we were in the recovery room, when my daughter was born, it was at St. Vincent's, which is they're making it a condos or something. But we could look at the recovery room and see the Village Vanguard, or just a snippet of it around. And she's like, "Yeah, dude, that's where I was born. You were born where they invented barbed wire to keep the cows out of the corn." You They're both really great kids, though, so it's fun.
Nice, really nice. Hey, hold on one second. I just have to get a little wrap right here.
No problem.
I don't mean a wrap, I mean this kind of a wrap.
Gotcha.
So yeah. So let's see. Wow. So you moved around a little bit, and uh, yeah, and you were teaching before you came to Saddleback, and in a college, in a school, right?
Right. So that's kind of an interesting thing too, because here I am, 37. We had actually just bought a house in New Jersey. It was wonderful. It was in Roselle Park. We could walk to the train station and get into the city without having to drive. But and sometimes I had been approached about teaching positions before, and uh, none of them were particularly appealing. But there was something about this one. Our daughter had just been born, and I thought it might help me stay home and be off the road a little bit more. We were living in New York at the time, and New Jersey, technically. We were living in Brooklyn before that, in Park Slope, where a lot of musicians lived at that time. Now it's like gentrified since 9/11. Musicians can hardly afford to live there.
Yeah.
But so it was sort of an interesting thing. It was a 1-year visiting professorship out there in DeKalb, and I thought, well, this would be great. My academic pedigree, even now, but especially then, was not particularly stellar. So I thought having 1-year teaching experience at a university, and I knew that I enjoyed teaching, but I'd never done it in the system. And I was really gratified by it. So it was a big challenge for me getting my mindset to switch from having lived as a freelancer to teaching at a university. That being said, it was a bigger change for me teaching at a university it really had great students there, like the piano player that was playing trumpet in my band, piano in the top band, now plays with Quentin Marsalis, and he's like, all these kids have gone on to great things.
Yeah.
They're good players, and little jewel in the Midwest there. Still a great school. And the change from going from that school to Saddleback was bigger than going from being a freelancer to a university for me. It was
interesting.
because it's a
Saddleback was
completely different
stricter.
type of community and student, a completely different type of student at a community college. Not better or worse, just different.
Yeah.
And it took me, I don't know. I mean, if Jeff's still watching, he'll tell you the same thing. It takes you about 2-3 years to get your sea legs dealing with that kind of a culture. I really love it. I mean, it took me a while to realize that if there was a dude playing, trumpet in the big band who was teaching high school economics, that was just as valuable for him as someone we're trying to get ready to get into the professional music scene, because you're looking at music instead of at the very apex of it. You're looking at like the broader cultural context of what it does to bring joy to people. That was quite a lesson for me to learn. It also taught me that talent is not nearly as important as work ethic, which I think I was loath to believe prior to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. That statement alone is really interesting, isn't it? It's just one of the many, I won't say lies, but one of the many perspectives that, you know, we've been taught to believe more than perhaps is correct.
Yeah, it's almost like a myth,
Yeah,
in
yeah,
that regard. But it's really about, are you in it for the long haul, and what reasons are
yeah,
motivating you to create music?
yeah,
And when my students come to Saddleback, I mean, they joke about it. They get what they call the anti-recruitment speech. I'm like, it's very tough to make your living as a musician. It's very difficult. I mean, when I got my first teaching position at Northern, I was feeling, like, I guess for lack of a better word, guilty about it, because I knew how hard it was. And I happened to be doing some work, a guest clinic spot at the Eastman School of Music. And I asked, that great piano player, he just retired. I'm spacing, but he was in charge of the jazz program. And I said, do you ever feel guilty? And he said, no, because the skills that they're going to learn from us, are going to help them in whatever they do or end up doing. And of course, at Eastman, many of them are very successful.
Yeah.
Then when I got to Saddleback College, my one of my dearest friends, Norm Weston, who was the comp guy, total non-jazz guy, non-improviser. But when I walked into his office, he had a picture of Palestrina here and a picture of Miles Davis here, huge pictures. And I thought, he's just super hip. And and I said, "Do you ever feel guilty, Norm? Because it's so hard." He says, "No." He says, "Because," and his wife was a corporate muckety muck at the time. He says, and she was a music major in college. She played horn, French horn. She said, "You know what? You have the rest of your life to be miserable. You might as well do what you love in college." So that's how I've kind of structured my philosophy of teaching. Those two things. You want to do what you love in college because you're going to deal with the rest of your life, whatever you're going to deal with. And the skills that you're going to get are going to help you no matter what you do. I mean, how many musicians do you know that became lawyers after the fact? I mean, I can name them several,
Yeah, me
it's
too.
pretty, and they're working, they're doing they're the right kind of lawyers,
Yeah.
they're doing the pro bono work and helping with immigration and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, little different, but I flashed on Japan when I've been to Japan many times, and often notice that the children are really allowed to be crazy and wild free. They're crazy, and it's okay with the whole community. And I
Beautiful.
think that's why. I think it's a similar, it's like be wild and crazy now because after this, you're gonna have to really like follow all the
button
rules.
button
Yeah,
down.
yeah,
And it's interesting because I don't tend to think of Japanese culture if I'm thinking in terms of Gestalt or whatever the larger stereotypes. You always think of it as being very buttoned down. So I didn't know that they let the kids go crazy. That's kind of cool.
yeah, totally crazy.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, did you say you attended Eastman or you attended
No,
you just
no way I was going to be going to Eastman, man. I didn't really learn to play the trombone very well until I was like 34. I was just struggling. I'm
wow,
still trying, man.
such a
But I went to school at Arizona State. I grew up about a mile and a half from Arizona State, and it was a great experience, a great school. The trombone player there was a wonderful trombone player, but he was a classical dude. He didn't do any jazz, but he was great. What I needed was to learn how to play the trombone, and he was great for me.
yeah,
There was a wonderful trombonist who's still around. He retired some years ago, named Tom Urban, that was teaching down at U of A in Tucson. And I asked my teacher, who was a student of the dude at ASU, Gail Wilson, great teacher. And and I asked him, I said, "Should I go down to Tucson because Tom does jazz?" And he was like, "Nope." And that was the extent of any discussion I had about where I was going to go to college. Because if we grew up there, we knew if we played in the marching band, you could get a scholarship. And I'm the youngest of four kids, and it was kind of like just to assume that we'd have to make our way through college.
yeah, yeah. Interesting. But you do know Clay Jenkins, right?
Yeah, and I met Clay when I moved out here.
Oh,
One of the original members of the 11-piece band. Like him, I guess Jerry Pender technically isn't because Bob Shepard was doing it before Jerry joined. But yeah, Clay. I mean, I love Clay, man. He's a
yeah.
very special cat.
He
And
played
there's
on
certain
my
charts
first
that I
record
won't play.
without
I'm
Clay.
sorry. Yeah, there's just certain charts I just won't do without Clay there because they're kind of written for him.
I was just saying that he played on my first record. There was this song called "Coming Into Present Time," which started really just open blowing, and then it came into this waltz, and uh, and then did the song, and he blew on that. That was really fun. He,
Yeah, Clay, I am recalling when you're telling that story, when Susan and I got married, basically it was like a concert with a little bit of wedding thrown in. And one of the things that happened while we were saying our vows was Clay Jenkins and Tony Malaby were just playing free in the background. It was kind of cool, you know?
wow,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. I had a bunch of girl singers sing. Oh yeah, it was. I forget the name of the song right now, but it's a song that basically said, "I looked in your eyes, and that was it." You know, that was like
Yeah,
my husband and my song, and they were singing as I was walking up the.
nice. Yeah, I wrote the processional for Susan to walk up the aisle. Yeah, four
Oh,
trombones. Yep,
oh,
we have it
nice.
framed. It's in the other room. Yeah.
um, yeah. So, when did you? So, okay. So you learned um, from basically classical trombone. Which, by the way, I have to say, when somebody finally told me how the slide trombone was played, I couldn't believe it. What a hard instrument to get a hold of.
Yeah, it's difficult, but it's also simple in some ways because it's just a tube. You know, there's no valves or buttons or anything. It's like one of the oldest instruments, that you can, they figured out how to change pitch by making it bigger, by moving the slide around. It's every instrument has its own beauty, so there's no.
Well, there's a spot where the two notes next to each other, one is out and one is in, right?
Right, yeah, because there's partials on the trombone. So it's just like if you took a garden hose and put a mouthpiece in one end and a funnel in the other, it's going to have an overtone series. This is obviously something that exists in nature, like a pine cone or something. This is not, fabricated. And so that's in Western civilization, we use that thing that happens in nature to create our tonal system. It's interesting to me that because that's a force of nature, that other cultures that are non-Western don't use that tuning system. It's kind of interesting to me, and I'd like to figure out why. I'm sure someone's done several thousand doctoral theses on that, but I haven't read them yet because it is something that exists in nature. So just the same way as a saxophone, any tube you're blowing air through, it has an overtone. Any sound's going to have an overtone. It's kind of cool.
A tube
Yes, right.
in there too. Yeah,
Yep, same thing.
yeah. I that reminds me of when I go see Benny Maupin play. He seems to use the whole room as his resonant chamber, whatever room he's in, and it
Yeah, that's
fascinates me.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yep.
Um,
Great musicians tend to do that. I've seen Wayne Bergeron do that, the way he places his sound. Everyone thinks of Wayne as a high note guy, and no one realizes what an exceptional, uh, sensitive musician he is. He's tremendous at placing his sound where it belongs, given the context. In my band, the musical context switches quickly, sometimes even within a tune, and he's always great at recognizing that.
um, what I know. Excuse me.
Oh no.
when I when I listen to, I'd say a lot of wind instruments, I really notice the tone difference of players. What contributes to the trombone player's tone? Is it vibrato?
That could be one facet of it. A lot of it is contingent on the equipment and what kind of sound you want to have and what players you're emulating. A lot of it has to do with your embouchure, and what your approach is. Because, like singers, which have a wide variety of the instrument and the way they approach it, certain. I'm trying to think of singers who have a similar instrument but may use it in a different way. Um, None come to mind right now.
I mean,
I
you
mean,
mean
may go
like,
ahead.
I don't know. You mean just some famous singers to think about, like
Mhm.
Ella and Sarah or Carmen or.
Right, but see, all three of those to me seem to have slightly different instrument. I was trying to think of singers who have a similar vocal timbre, but
Oh,
use it differently based on their personalities.
I mean,
Carmen McRae, man, that's someone who gets deep into a lyric, and that's one of the things that even if someone had the same sort of instrument that she has, it's going to manifest itself differently. So, as with all improvisers, not necessarily just even wind instruments, whatever story you're telling is going to be valuable. I mean, one of my favorite things to do when I'm teaching non-musicians at the college on probably the first day, these are people who may never have heard a lick of jazz, is to play that recording of Billie Holiday with the Cats playing Fine and Mellow.
Hmm.
And the first two sax solos is, I think it's Benny Webster and then Lester Young. And
Uh-huh.
they both play a 12-bar blues on a tenor saxophone, but it sounds like two completely different people.
Right.
And that's a really valuable lesson,
Hmm.
for musicians, but particularly for non-musicians. It's about your stories, what you're going to tell.
Oh, by the way, Dick Nash is here.
Oh my goodness. Now the pressure's on. I gave him that weird solo recording that I did some years ago. And he's like, man, I've never heard the trombone sound like that. I don't think it was a compliment. I've never heard so many sounds. I love Dick, man. That cat's bad. That's a legend.
uh, Cecily Gardner says hi. Taylor Hatch says hi. There's people on here who you know, but I'm just saying, I'm just giving you messages.
Thank you. Because this is really great for me because I don't do any social media whatsoever. I don't do Facebook. I don't do anything. I owe people money. I don't want people to know where I am.
Okay, so getting back to the tone, there was another question I wanted to ask you. Um, well, I mean, of course, every artist, when they express themselves, right, their tone changes and becomes unique, which is something, as a singer, we strive for all the time because we have words too, and
Yeah.
expressions. But yeah, I had Bob on here, Bob Shepard, and he was talking about tone and playing some stuff, and um, yeah, like Frank Rossellino comes to mind for trombone sound, right?
Frank, man, that cat's an anomaly. And as a matter of fact, if Dick's watching, Dick recorded some of those things with Frank that I heard. Actually, Dick was kind enough to give me this huge history of Dick Nash CD thing, which I love and I still listen to. And I had no idea how much jazz playing he had done with Frank and other guys. But Rosalino, man, this guy was kind of self-taught and his playing exactly represents that Italian American thing. I mean, it sounds like an Italian American to me when you hear Rosalino. He's one of my favorites. And if there's anyone that I'm guilty of trying to emulate, it's probably him over any other trombone player. You have to watch yourself, because you don't want to just be, too close sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to agree with you. He was one of my favorites too. When I was 21, I was here and I was working as a waitress at Dante's, and he was playing a lot there at the time. And
Hmm.
he was a hell of a nice guy too. He was just
Hmm.
a terrific guy, and I won't go into the details, but unfortunately, I was around when he killed himself, and that whole horrible story. I was dating somebody, and his girlfriend came over to the house on that morning, and then we
Oh.
had all the jazz people over in the afternoon, and it was really, you know,
I never had the pleasure of meeting or him or even hearing him live. It was my junior year of high school when that went down. But because I love his playing so much. It's so troubling. I've asked several people who knew him very well, like Holman and Ron Stouts, told me some great stories about it. And so it's what we would now understand as a mental health issue, man. It just wasn't talked about at the time.
yeah,
So it was same thing with Monk, man. It was just they weren't dealing with it head on
yeah,
until the very end. So it's tragic, and maybe the silver lining is that I feel at least now we live in a culture where there's less negative feelings about what that it means with mental health issues. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, definitely. And of course, Frank sang great. Do you have that record? Have you heard that? Yeah, I have it too. It's great.
Well, and when
Great.
when Frank was young, he was the lemon drop kid, and he was known for, it was almost like a vaudeville sort of thing, and he came up in that entertainment manner, and the fact that he was just an incredible jazz musician it's almost like he blossomed completely, formed from the head of Zeus.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Holman also told me another great story about when they were on Kenton's band in the 50s. If I don't think he'd mind me sharing this.
Yeah.
He said that whenever Stan knew that they had a recording come up, he would keep Frank from blowing a bunch, if at all. So by the time they got to the studio, Frank hadn't like played a solo in like 10 days. He just would let it all out in the studio. That's what Bill told me. I'm pretty sure Willis is a man of his word. I just thought that was so funny.
Oh gosh. Musician stories. Taylor Hatch would like to know, as a jazz educator, what do you do to influence your students to help them find their own sound, whether it's on trombone or other type of instrumentalists?
Yeah, so it's actually two different questions for me because I'm a trombonist. When people come and study trombone with me, they're going to jump through a certain amount of hoops that you just have to go through. You know, these are fundamental brass instrument things that we need to address usually at the beginning. In terms of finding your own voice, that's where you're leaning on the creative side of things, and um, it's basically just creating a culture of awareness and exposure. All right. So if someone comes and okay, so here's a good example. I had a young student come to me and say, I want to go to whatever, because it was a trombone player about my age who's a very great player, but playing real straight ahead. And I said, well, that's great, but I mean, this guy sounds more like Curtis Fuller than himself. You know what I'm saying? So that youngster happened to be Ryan Dragon actually when he was a junior in high school. So and that's, so it's just saying, yeah, man, like I said, I'm guilty of emulating Rosalino as best I can. I nowhere near the great player he is, but um, you know, it's just being aware. And like I said, I'm 58. You're never going to arrive. People are still hipping me to things. It becomes very dangerous when you become a full-time teacher to not, you got to have people keeping you aware. And I'm constantly telling my students, you guys need to hit me to things because sometimes, man, you're just dealing with administrative stuff. You got your head down and you lose your creative bearing sometimes. So it's up to them to. I'm also a little disappointed with some of my students who don't have as much irreverence as they have, which I'm always preaching them to. I'm like, what's the matter with you guys, man? You're supposed to, why don't you know, paint something on the rock in the quad or something and do something creative, and a little irreverence is good. It's built into the music we play,
Yeah.
with the reverence, of course. So,
Yeah.
so that's let me see if I can get back to Taylor's question. So it's going to have to be an angel thing, but really, as a teacher, all you're doing is offering shortcuts. Sometimes, man, everyone's going to have to do it on themselves. You're just guiding them. If a student's successful, it's not a result of me. It's a result of their work. If you're a good teacher, you're never taking credit for your students' successes. The student is their own success story. I mean, I've been feeling this for a long time, and then I had it confirmed. Sean Jones and I were talking when he was out for Jazz Day at the college. And then I saw him say something in print. He was really pissed at some teacher, I can't remember what it was, who was taking credit for some youngster who's, got a recording contract. But man, no, that's not what we do. I got my own set of problems to worry about how to play good every day. I don't need to be, taking the karma from the students, I'm proud of my students. They don't need me to be, you know.
Yeah, that's an interesting point about being a teacher, isn't it? Let's see. Blip, blip, blip. Oh, yeah, Andrea Wolper said you could say that Billy and Abby Lincoln had somewhat similar timbres. Yeah, that's true. Um,
Okay, yeah, that's a great example. So let's go back to that then. So that being the case, and of course Billy's pretty unique, but they do have that similar, instrument. The message is still completely different.
yeah,
So ask yourself why. It's always a matter of asking the why questions, not
yeah,
the what questions.
yeah,
And it's the message, man.
yeah,
We all share commonalities. Certainly, African American women of that generation shared many common characteristics growing up in the United States of America. But they also have differences. There's no stereotype that's going to work for a jazz musician. Everyone's going to have to be an individual.
yeah. For me, I was just thinking about what you said. So, and I actually have, I don't know if you do this too, but so when I listen to my students or I listen to somebody who's asking me my opinion about what they're doing or I'm producing or whatever, if I'm in the position of, kind of listening and maybe suggesting or guiding, um, sometimes I will basically leave it alone. Somebody is singing not the way that I would sing, or even that I would like to hear the phrasing, with a space after this word, or this word more emphasized. And so sometimes I just leave it alone because I feel like I don't want to step on who they are, and who they are might be that exactly what they're doing. It doesn't have to be what I do. But then when I look at myself, especially right now, because as all of us probably, I'm into development right now, right? Because there's not really performance, so I'm really eyeballing myself and trying to
Mhm.
grow. And so, like, there's some kind of fine line. uh let's see, how do I put this, between um pushing my I'm not really sure, I've never said this out loud. So between pushing myself to be more, I don't know what the word is, dramatic, or more obvious, or more courageous, more, all of those kind of adjectives, and what I feel really comfortable singing, which is more subtle.
Mhm.
So right now I'm
Yeah.
kind of dealing with that, like, and also for me it has to do with the music that is being played. Specifically, I'm actually listening to things that I've had on the shelf in the recording studio where the band is already playing, and I have to be myself and sound good. So where is that line that I can find and be comfortable with? And it's really, I think that's a really difficult uh, lesson. You know.
It is, but the fact of the matter is, I think, Kathy, that the fact that you're concerned about it and you're on that journey is half the battle, as opposed
Yeah.
to many players and musicians, singers who wouldn't even have the thoughtfulness about it. So that's the first thing. I'd like to go back to that point you were talking about when you're producing something, and there's such a weird thing between projecting what your take on it is and what the the fundamental thing is. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with Slonimsky's book, The Lexicon of Musical Invective. This
I've
is one of
only
my favorite. Lexicon of Musical Invective. He gathered the dude, he lived to be 101. He spoke 7 languages fluently. So he translated all these negative reviews of Beethoven, how his music got dissed when it came out. Bartok, of course, Stravinsky, you know, pieces that we now consider masterpieces were dissed initially when they came out by the critics. It's a fascinating book.
wow.
And he's got a Invecticon in the back, which is one of my favorite. He was a very humorous dude, man. He's got an Invecticon in the back of the book, which is, you can look up the word pig and see how many reviewers used it, or dirty dog, and see how many different reviewers used it. I just love the fact that he came up with the word Invecticon. But at the beginning of this book, uh, uh, he has an essay about, is there a standard beauty of art? It's sort of similar to what Kandinsky was trying to get at with his book. And it begs a very important question. Is there an absolute standard for beauty or an aesthetic, or is it relative? And he drew a different conclusion than I normally draw, because I think we have to acknowledge that, and I've been preaching this to my classes and to my students, that there's no way that we can escape our culture. We're all prisoners of our culture, as it were. And um, because of that, you need to be careful about what you trust. I mean, if you look at other cultures, it's weird. One of the first things that got me, this is sort of, I mean, painful to think about, so I apologize for bringing it up. But one of the things that first got me to think about this was when it was discovered that in certain of those cultures, in Africa, they were doing clitorectomies, and I was thinking, for me, I was just like, what? But then I wanted to stand back from it and see if I could objectively ascertain how that happened. I'm glad to report that I couldn't, but going through the process of trying to think that way made me realize that, we're all prisoners of our culture, because whatever weird concept is going to say that that's possible, that tells you that. I mean, if you look at our own country, and this is relevant now, I've been preaching this for a while too. Let's ask ourselves, when the Supreme Court of the United States finally got a racial decision right, I mean, what year would that have been? Because, they were making decisions based on them being prisoners of their culture up to 1954, basically, right? So these are supposed to be the brightest minds in jurisprudence in the Western Hemisphere, you know, and yet they got it wrong. So that should be our first clue that we could also be incorrect in assumptions. I think it's really important to always be on guard so that you're aware that your perspective could be skewed. Because I think, and it's a long ass way to get around to your point, Cathy, sorry, which is that when you're talking about those things that you're concerned with when you're looking inwardly, which we all should do, if as long as it's a healthy dose and not an unhealthy dose, it's about sincerity. You can force yourself to do other things and force yourself to emulate someone you admire. But ultimately, when you're playing, you want to let everything go, and it has to be the sincerest form it's got to be sincere. People tend to respond to sincerity more than chops or talent. I can't remember who it was that said that nuance is the epitome of chops. It's not how fast you play. Nuance is the epitome of virtuosity.
I like that.
Yeah, I stole it. I can't remember who said it.
Kind of reminds me of I sometimes will show my students a Schofield tune on that Groove record, and um, ah, the bass player is the guy. He taught at Cal Arts. Famous bass player.
Charlie Hayden.
Yes. So John takes a guitar solo. I don't know. It's great. And then Charlie's turn to solo, and he plays whole notes, and it's perfect. It's just perfect. So yeah, that's kind of nuance. The information that you just said, that statement about nuance.
Well, and Charlie was great about embracing his sound,
Yeah.
even from a very young age. There's a very famous story, I'm sure you may have heard it, or some of our friends listening, where when Ornette was he at the 5 spot? I think it was that other club. Monk was at the 5 spot. Whatever club it was, when the record label took him over to New York in 59, 60, Charlie was playing, and he looked down, and there was some dude down there with his head up to his face about 6 inches away, because he couldn't believe the sound that Charlie Hayden was getting. He had those gut strings and everything, and the bass was great. It was Leonard Bernstein. Charlie was trying to kick this guy away from his bass, and someone told him that was Lenny Bernstein. He just couldn't believe the sound that Hayden was getting from the bass.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I have made a little. Well, I get it was a faux pas at the time. Like John Gianelli, who used to play a lot. He played with Carmen, and he had the most amazing sound. I said that to him once, and I said that bass sounds incredible, and he said, "Well, it's me playing that bass." I was like, "Excuse me."
Yeah. That's always a dangerous thing, man. Yeah. I mean, there's a bunch of those musician things. I like the way you went for that note. Good effort.
Okay,
That trumpet sounds really good today.
Time for a few comments. Cecily Gardner, Joey, your composition for Idlewild Arts Academy Music Department, Jazz Department was epic.
Thank you, Seth.
Toby Simmons says hi. We're getting Tokyo people actually watching. They're awake. Do you have a process for composing and arranging for large ensembles? Can you talk about your time with Doc Severinsen?
Okay. So there's some mistakes about the time with Doc's severance, and I never really played in Doc's band or did. What happened was Pete Chris Lieb obviously played in the Tonight Show band back in that era.
Yeah.
And I had met Pete when I was at the All American College Band in Florida in 1983 when I was still in college. And I think he had come through ASU. And so we had an acquaintance, and he had heard my 11-piece band. So when I was a kid growing up in Tempe, all right, let me answer the question first, and then I'll go into that story.
Okay.
So let's talk about two different things. Let's talk about the Doc thing, which is relatively easy to get through.
Yeah.
Pete invited me to bring some charts to the Tonight Show, and those guys were great. I mean, that was my education in a lot of ways, man. And it was great to see because Conti Condoli was in the band, and he was the straw boss at the time, and Doc was pissed about something. Doc was there with his little bulldog, and Doc got pissed about something after they played through these couple of charts of mine and walked off. And then Conti had to smooth everything over with the cats, you know. Doc wasn't normally like that. I think it was a bad day,
Yeah.
probably because I was there. I don't know. But I was like 23, I don't know, 23 or 24 at the time. And Pete Chrisley, one of my favorite people, he was always very supportive. When I first moved out here, he and Bobby Shue were really great. Indeed, Bobby Shue's introduced me to Clay Jenkins, you know. So I just brought in these charts, and Doc liked him. I kind of knew it was one I'd written for my 11-piece band when I was a kid. And I thought, oh, it's called Screaming Seeding Scholars and Other Scotch-Driven Protagonists. And I just knew it was a raucous blues that Doc could play some high crap on. It would be great. Doc's a phenomenal player. I'm not saying crap like it's a bad thing. He's ridiculous, you know, and he's still, man, he's an inspiration. He's still practicing every day, and he still sounds great, man.
Yeah.
So that was how that happened. And I'm not sure even Doc remembers that he bought those charts, you know. There was one that was the screaming one, and the one that was like a little darling sort of thing. And I was writing pretty weird stuff at that time. So I knew it was in Lou. And I really owe it to Pete Chrisley that he was able to do that. So that's the short answer to that one. Now, the writing style question is interesting because when we were talking about Taylor's question earlier about trombone players, when trombone players come to me, they're going to go through a regimen. No matter what we're going to get to as an individual, we're going to have to do certain fundamental things. When people started teaching composition is a weird thing, right? So when people started asking me to teach them composition, this is before the university where you're obligated to teach it. They wanted to study privately with me, right? I felt pretty uncomfortable about that because I think most good writers are autodidacts. I think most good jazz composers are, when we say self-taught, it doesn't mean uneducated. But if you get educated about composition in an institution, which I now do, so I'm very leery of it, you know. Again, there's got to be a modicum of irreverence involved. Your influences can be myriad. You can have never studied jazz composition like I never did, and have studied a bunch of things that influence you. I mean, I was fascinated with the Bartok string quartets. So what do? Listen to them a bunch, try to figure out what they're doing. And then after that, I get the scores and see what they're doing. You know, it's all about investigation. So when someone comes to take a comp lesson with me, one of the first things we say is, if I say something that you disagree with, you're allowed to tell me to screw off forcefully, but I would like it if you could justify why you made the decision in lieu of what my point was. That's all. And then later I found out that Dr. Weston, my colleague at Saddleback College, does the same thing. He says, like, yeah, composition, you can do anything, but you need to be able to justify your decisions. And that's important because otherwise, sometimes it could be as simple as, I think it sounds good. And that's a little bit of a cop-out, but sometimes that's what it is. I've been listening to these Kasena African bands lately, man, and the way they approach pitch is significantly different. Again, we're prisoners of our culture. You need to let go of what your preconceived notion is. Oh, that reminds me, when I'm talking about composers being able to do what they want, that's important, obviously. You're just guiding them, and you're saying, you know, I did this. When we do comp lessons, they go for an hour and a half, and I'm usually dealing with all the students' music and making suggestions for whatever that's worth. And then I find it's been very informative for all of us if we listen to 35, 40 minutes of my music at the end of the lesson with scores so they can ask questions because I can tell them what the approach is then. I can't approach their music from my perspective. I was saying earlier, when a student comes to Saddleback College, the kids joke about the anti-recruitment speech I give them because they come and we know how difficult it is to be a musician, I'm like, okay, first of all, is there anything else you're gratified by that you can do to make a living? Because you're going to live in abject poverty and never find love, and it's going to be a miserable existence if you're going to be a jazz musician. I think they know that I'm pretty happy, but I just want to be honest with them. Some schools, man, they're saying, "Oh yeah, you're going to get out of here and be working in the studios." Well, even the studio cats aren't working in the studio now. So I'm very honest that we're approaching it. It's an art, and we need to have valuable skills to be able to make a living. But it's going to be difficult to make a living even if you have those skills. So if they say, "I absolutely can't see myself doing anything but music," okay, all right. Here's the rule number one: get yourself a sugar mama or a sugar daddy. Okay. And then we'll go from there, because we're just going to talk about the art of the music, and it's going to be difficult to make a living. And I think it's really important to say that up front, so that we're not being disingenuous about what the reality of the work situation is. Right now, it's even particularly weirder. Yeah. So in terms I hope I answered that question about the doc thing and the composition thing. My process, do I have a formal process? Absolutely not. And I like to think, I don't know if this is true or not, that each time I'm sitting down, I'm going from a point of inspiration. When I was younger, this is interesting. I've never shared this with anyone, I don't think. When I was younger, I could feel like a little gold sort of ball right here in my sternum when it was time to start writing. I don't feel that anymore, but I can still write okay. I've got a brass quintet sitting over here that just kind of happened by accident, partly because I'm late for a recording, but I've been doing all this other academic work that I have to do. And I just didn't feel like doing it. So I wrote the first movement in about 4 hours one day. So, it begs the question of inspiration. I'm very fortunate that I've never been in a position to have writer's block or never been able to get something done. If I get a commission, there was one time I got a commission from a percussion quartet in Chicago. And I had a pretty clear vision, not very clear, pretty clear vision of what I want to do. But I actually got to a place, and I knew it was going to be about 5 movements, where I was stuck. This is one of my favorite stories. And I'd never been stuck in my life as a composer. And I mentioned it to Dr. Weston, the composition teacher at Saddleback College, who's one of my heroes as a composer and as a human being. And I said, "Norm, I've never had this happen before." He said, "I'm stuck." He said, "What's it for?" I said, "It's for percussion quartet." He said, "Percussion quartet? You can do anything. You can say, go over here and pee in a cup." You know, how can you be stuck in a percussion quartet? They'll do anything, which is true. Yeah. And have them pee in a cup. They love that. So what I ended up doing was trying to think of it more. And this is where maybe some of that Dragon Cellar stuff started to brew, even though this was several years ago, to think about, instead of it just being about music, what is a percussion quartet? Well, it's a freaking spectacle. So I devised a scenario in my head where there's a timpani here, and there's a percussionist about 5 yards over here, and there's another one over here, 5 yards away. So that spatial relationships become important. And you're throwing a tennis ball, and it's going to hit the timpani, and then the other percussionist has to catch it. And that broke my writer's block.
Yeah, it reminds me of Brad Dudes too. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we did this gig up in Idlewild a decade ago, and Brad and Wabich created this drum set where they shared the middle foot. It was the funniest thing I ever saw, but it was cool too. Wob told me he just found that recording somewhere. I haven't heard
That would be
it. They
fun.
sent it to me in a link, but I'm so much of a Luddite I couldn't open it.
Okay, so now I have to bring up a story. I've told you this. So I was curating an establishment downtown in LA it was a really incredible room called Bar Fedora. It was in the back of a raw food place that was really quite nice. But it was like a New York club. You went into it and it was like a beautiful club, and behind Disney Hall. Anyway, I thought that I would hire Ryan Dragon and Joey Sellers. And I remember Joey kept saying, "You sure you want to do this now?" And I thought, yeah, I want to do this. So we get there, and I just remember this one very nice, sweet, middle-aged couple coming in, and he wanted to introduce his girlfriend or wife to jazz. And I
I remember
felt
that.
obliged to say, this isn't like kind of regular jazz. And they looked at each other, and she apparently agreed. Very sweet woman. And so they stayed, and they stayed the whole first set. They were very
Mhm.
entertained, which, ladies and gentlemen, really was stretching because Ryan. It was just Ryan and Joey, two trombones. But Ryan, like at one point, was in a like wasn't a speedo, but it was like
Yeah,
a, yeah, something like that, and a mask, a full face.
Nacho Libre mask,
Yeah,
Luchadora mask. Yeah.
yeah, and then they were roaming all over the place and playing and giving us things to do. Anyway, but can I play Piggy, Piggy, Piggy? Do you think that is okay if I play Piggy, Piggy, Piggy?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know which version you're talking about, from a concert or from the.
Hey,
Oh
uh,
well,
it is this one. Let's see. Gee, this might have even been because it says Cathy Segal-Garcia. It might have even been from from the Bar
I don't
Fedora.
know. Let's see. I don't remember that, but that would be. I think that might be the promo reel. I'm not sure.
Let's see. Yeah, it is. Let's see.
Piggy, piggy, piggy! Piggy, piggy, piggy! Piggy, piggy! Piggy, piggy, piggy! Piggy, piggy, piggy! Piggy, piggy, piggy! Piggy, piggy! Oi! We like bacon! Piggy, piggy, piggy! Piggy, piggy, piggy! Piggy, piggy, piggy! Piggy, piggy! Which reminds me, I shacked with Jane for 7 years. She was a drunk. I loved her. My parents hated her. I hated my parents. It made for a nice foursome. One day we went on a picnic together, up in the hills. Water comes over the back.
Goes on in with an evil eye last night.
Bacon blushes. He can use no more. It's a revolution!
Oh my God.
Oh man. Yeah. I mean, I remember that couple too at the bar Fedora,
Yeah.
and they were so cool. They said, we need to leave now, but it's really great. We were just going to stay for once, and they were like, it was a great experience. They were so cool and open minded about it, because I'm sure they thought they were going to hear like "Girl from Ipanema" or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much in that. I mean, I think that was the first time we did the Rite of Spring as it was originally intended for
Yeah.
two trombones.
Yeah.
And Ryan had built that rig on the bottom. That's our percussion. So we have these water jugs in this wooden crate that Ryan made so we can play them with bass drum pedals. And it was after that. And it's so, doing those gigs is so physically demanding.
Yeah.
It's just two trombones. The Rite of Spring takes us about 17 minutes, 20 minutes, and it's not like you're resting. So it's just a sort of a physical. Anyhow, after that, I had jokingly said to Ryan, yeah, well, maybe the next one we'll do the Barbara Adagio for strings, and I never really seriously considered it. And then one day at the college, I had 2 or 3 things that got canceled right back to back. And I thought, you know what? Let's just go. And I grabbed the score and I just kind of wrote up the chord changes, and I thought, and I sent it to Ryan. I said, here's the thing. And then we decided that we actually needed a chart. So I actually we do have a version of the Barbara Adagio string, which is obviously just so completely wrong for that band, but it's amazingly effective. It's also very physically challenging because Ryan and I both, but mainly me, are having to do a lot of multiphonics. There's a lot of chords in that thing, obviously, and it's just a riot, man. And then after that, we added to our repertoire the 5.5-minute version of the opera Carmen, where Ryan's in drag through much of it. I don't know if you've seen that. Did we do that at the bar?
I think you did. I want to say you
Okay.
did.
was relatively new in the repertoire. And I think at the Bar Fedora, we did have a world premiere there. That's where we premiered the balloon popping piece, where we put little pin pokes on the end of our slides,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and we have the T-shirts with balloons, inflated balloons on them, and we get a rhythm established and pop the balloons in time. That piece is also, that was the world premiere of that one.
So how did I'm sure I've asked you this before. How did you even come up with the idea that you and Ryan would do an act like this?
It didn't start. It didn't start as an act. So when Ryan was in high school, his junior year, I think, and his dad is a trombone player that I've known forever. Artie was the conductor of the Disneyland band, and I worked in Disney for that 10 and a half years. And he's great. He's one of my favorite people. And so then his son was a junior high school and wanted to take some lessons. And so we had some lessons. And I did not feel Ryan would bring a check from his dad every week. I never felt comfortable taking money because it was like more like family than anything. Plus, Ryan was playing his ass off, you know. So then Ryan went off to the Berklee School of Music, and we would occasionally send photos or videos of us out trying to weird one another. I had my wife, who's better at the internet than I am, buy a trombone. She found a Czechoslovakian trombone for $12.47, cost $25 to ship it. And I drilled holes in the bell. I had a vision that we could, you know how cymbals have a rivets?
Yeah.
And the rivets, I wanted chains and rivets in the bell. So I drilled holes in the bell, and it was a failure. It didn't work. I sent it to Ryan, and then he sent me a video of him doing a society gig. They were playing In the Mood, and there was a trombone solo, and he would play like a normal solo, and then just start kind of screaming a couple of notes, you know, beep, beep, ba doo, you know, like that. And you know, so then when he'd come home from Berklee, we would just get together and play duets like we used to. Sometimes we do duets out of a book. There's a great gentleman who just passed away a few years ago, Eric Culver, great trombone player. And he wrote this book when he was at Juilliard, I think. And it's one of my favorite duets. So we would play those, and then we would just improvise. You know, we'd just say, okay, let's go. Not tunes or anything, just go. And so then it just started becoming a thing. And at one of these, you know, we were just getting together to play. And we had done a couple of things, and I started scribbling up some things. And I said, Ryan, do you realize we have a band? You know, it's a band now, you know? And so that's where it kind of came from. One of my favorite stories of Ryan Dragon in high school was he was taking private lessons with me, but he was also playing in our Wednesday night big band at the college, which is a pretty good band. It's always a combination of younger students, our students, and community members who are professional or semi-professional. It's quite good. It's quite good right now. It's too bad we got shut down. It's one of the strongest bands I've had. Anyhow, at this time, Ryan was taking private lessons with me, and he was playing in that Wednesday night band. And so at one of our private lessons, he was pushing the time a little bit, rushing a little bit, just a little bit. And I tend to do that. It's a fault of mine, so I have to be aware of it. And I said to him, I said, Ryan, one of my bad habits is I tend to push the time a little bit, and I can be on top a little bit. I'd hate to see you develop one of my bad habits that would kill me. So just be aware that you're doing that, and blah, blah, blah. So maybe a couple of weeks went by, and we were playing in the Wednesday night band. A couple of weeks ago by in that lesson, maybe just a week. And Ryan's playing a stop time thing. It's actually a piece I wrote called Epic Pepper Queen, titled after my wife. And Ryan, it is a stop time that starts and stops the solo. And Ryan was rushing a little bit. Keep in mind, he's a junior or senior in high school, right? He's rushing a little bit. I cut off the band, and I said to Ryan, I said, Ryan, what is it that you and I have a tendency to do when we're blowing? And he thought about it. He's like, play a bunch of bullshit. And of course, the band just lost it. And I was like, no, we can, you know, it was a classic moment, classic Ryan moment.
Oh, you gotta love that. Joe Goldberger is here, and so is Kendall Kay, by the way. And Christian Korb, hi, and Marianne McSweeney, hi.
Oh, nice.
Joe wants to know any thoughts, comments on Peter Schickel's PDQ Bach. Were you influenced by PDQ Bach while you were coming up?
My mom had that book and the record, the vinyl, around the house when I was a kid. Yeah, so it's not directly, there's no direct correlation. The closest correlation we have to Peter Schickley and PDQ Bach is my my porno alias. I'm not in the porno business, but I do have a porno alias, and that name is Bolt Spillman. And so from that standpoint, I am to Bolt Spillman what Peter Schickli is to PDQ Bach. A few years ago, I had two students cancel lessons back to back. And I finally, after maybe 15 or 20 years, sat down to write Bolt Spillman's narrative. It's now complete. If anyone wants a copy, just email me and I'm glad to send it to you. Bolt Spillman was a trombonist. His career was in such a way that he played both with Louis Armstrong and Ornette Coleman. There's some conjecture as to whether he's still alive or not. No one's determined that. It's a whole thing. It's one of my favorite things that I've done writing wise, without music notes, but with words. So, yes. So Peter Schickli, not a direct influence, but certainly hearing those recordings as a youth must have done some damage.
Okay, cool. Oh yeah. Sorry, Yolanda. The book, The Lexicon. Somebody's asking for the name of it again.
I believe it's The Lexicon of Musical Invective, and it's still published for sure. The Lexicon of Musical Invective by Nicholas Slonimsky. Slonimsky was this Russian Jewish, although his family had converted because of the pogroms going on there before they came over. And he came over to the States in the early part of the 20th century. He lived to be 101. He wrote his autobiography when he was 99.
Oh.
And fascinating. He was playing with Zappa towards the end of his life. Oh. Zappa said, we're going to do this thing at the Coliseum and it only pays a dime. And Slonimsky didn't know what that meant, but it meant it paid $10,000. So he was kind of surprised. And he's one of my favorite characters in music. He came over with Koussevitzky. He came over as Koussevitzky, the conductor's rehearsal pianist. He actually took the Rite of Spring and took the time to bar it so that you can conduct the entire thing in 4/4. He's fascinating. He also is the way most jazz musicians know him is he was an insomniac, and he wrote this book called the something of scales, the thesaurus of scales and something else. I can't think of the title. The book's sitting around here somewhere. I should know it. And the only reason he was able to publish that was because he was a lexiconographer for Baker's, which was the academic bellwether of, it's a book about this thick for musicians' biographies, Western classical music composers. And because he spoke so many languages, he was invaluable. And he was the editor, I think, from the 4th or 5th edition moving forward. And so he said to the publisher, which is a very famous music publisher, would you mind publishing this book of these patterns I'd written out when I was sleepless at nights? Because it was his way of trying to relax. And he just had so much stuff going on in his head. So he just wrote out all these scales and stuff. And the publisher says, no, who's going to buy that? And he threatened to quit as the editor of the Baker's Autobiographical Dictionary unless they published it. So they reluctantly published this book. And apparently Coltrane got a hold of it somewhere. And Coltrane, I think it was in Downbeat or Mellymaker, one of those mags. They asked him what he was practicing. He said, oh, this and this, and I got this book called this. And of course, everyone went out and bought the book. And people still buy the book. It's still a great book.
Wow. That's really interesting.
There's just so many fascinating stories surrounding him. His daughter, Electra, when she was young, he would play really weird outside music by, maybe, I can't think of the composer's name, Varese or something, and give her an ice cream cone to see if he could get like a Pavlovian response so that she would like weird music because he was giving her ice cream. Daughter later said that wasn't very cool, but.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Let's see. I want to hear something else. What can we hear? Let's see. Joey Sellers. I'll show you what the YouTube says so that you can.
Okay.
You can help me pick. Let's see. So, weird trombone lessons or something. Let's see. Fullerton Jazz Festival. Trombone surprise, Joey Sellers and Christian Sue.
I don't know about any of these. I think that thing at Fullerton, Bruce had asked me to play one of the solo things. This solo trombone CD is very interesting because it got 4 stars in downbeat, unbeknownst to me, because I just recorded it as a lark to get some things off my chest.
Yeah.
And then I sent a copy to a couple of friends, Greg and Alex, and asked them, and they said, it sounds good. Why don't you flesh it out? So I went back and did some other stuff. And then it sat around for a year. And then Paul Carmen took it up to Idlewild and mastered it. And then it sat around for another year. And I was just in the band room one day at school, and the classical bass player came through and said, hey, man, congratulations. You know, you got 4 stars in downbeat. I said, I haven't done a record in like 4 years. I don't know what you're talking about. He said, some solo trombone thing. So yeah, it was just kind of a weird thing.
Okay, so here's the music. What might be cool?
All of them are so different and weird.
Monk's
I mean,
Dream.
there's regular ones. They're all pretty short. Let's go to the last one and see what that is. That one is
Stomping at the Savoy.
Stomping. Yeah, that's got some like over the top. This one I was trying to get in touch with my over the top style.
Okay, hold on one sec. Gotta watch all these phones in the room. Okay, here we go.
Understood.
Stomping at the Savoy. Whoops.
This year, Grant Park and the music.
That is not it. That's the ad. Okay, that is the ad. Okay. Wow, that's cool. I want that record. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, that was what happened was we had a recording session scheduled for the Algonquin Quartet, which is a trombone quartet I started when I was in New York. And so we have a version out here, Algonquin West. It was Alex Isles, Scott Whitfield, myself, and George Thatcher. And we had the recording session scheduled, but George and Alex got several days of work at MGM, I think it was, and you had to make all the dates. And so I said, of course, you know. So I was kind of going through a midlife crisis. I didn't really like me or jazz or what I was doing at the time. So I just said to the engineer, let me just come in and get a couple of things, little miniatures, because I tend to write when I'm composing for 11-piece band or other things in sort of an epic fashion where they're 9 or 10 minutes long. And I wanted to just try to experiment with some miniatures. And yeah, it was just kind of a lark. But I actually really enjoyed that CD. I think it's got a lot of different things. And I paid for the rights to a Bukowski poem and a poem by Charles Simic that we did some stuff with. Yeah. There's some overdub on the second section because once Alex and Greg told me I should flesh it out, I was like, okay, man, let's use the tricks that are available, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's no overdubbing on that one. That's what's funny about it, is I have to play the melody and the call and response at the same time, you know.
Yeah, how are you doing that?
I'm just playing the bottom line, ba ba, and singing.
Okay. So when you
Yeah,
that you it sounded like actually a horn, but it was you.
yeah, that's my voice. You want me to grab my axe for a minute?
Yes, please. Who wouldn't
I go
want
to the
that?
other room here. Um,
Hi, Ken Filiano. Ken Filiano
oh,
came on.
Ken Filiano, I owe you a response to your text. The answer is yes. I've been busy. Sorry, I just realized that. Damn. So, um, so when we do multiphonics,
Yeah.
uh, actually, I'm very proud of the fact that there's a tune on there called, what's it called? Oh, it's called Tension and Release on that solo CD. And Dr. Weston uses that in his composition classes. That's one of my proudest moments. So, multiphonics are when you play one note and sing another.
Oh, okay.
So I'm
Yeah.
singing the top note, playing the bottom. So in this case, I'm trying to sing. It's kind of difficult to do. I haven't done it in a long time. I don't know. Hopefully I can.
Oh,
You know, so it's like, you can become gimmicky, but you just want it to be musical. And it's somewhat comical in that context for sure, which is why Barbara's Adagio for strings is sort of comical when we do it.
that's cool. I just learned something new. I took out my flute, over the last few months, which I really went to college for, but I hadn't really played it. So, yeah. So, and then I remembered, oh, yeah, people sing while they're playing into the flute.
Mhm.
I just forgot about it. And yeah, I've been having a little bit of fun with that. But multiphonics, that's what it's called. Is that correct?
Yeah, technically, that's I think the technical term for it. But I mean, usually you're doing parallel intervals. You're not doing one line in a separate line. So that's
Yeah,
one thing that
yeah.
makes it funny.
That does,
Parallel would be like if we did Ode to Joy. Right.
yeah.
So what I started doing was experimenting with going in opposite directions, which is where the piece Tension and Release came from. So I better back up. So that last interval is the most dissonant interval in the overtone series, a minor ninth. And if I sing up and play down by half steps, I get to a fifth or an octave and a fifth, which is a consonant interval. So naturally, I'm yelling tension and release at those various points on the recording.
That's cool. I'm curious. Let's see. I'm curious. Yeah. I mean, I don't think you can answer this question. I think this is a silly question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So, what? I mean, obviously, you have a love for music that's more modern and has tension in it. Do you? Do you find that you have love for standards as well? I mean, does it kind of cover everything? Your appreciation of music?
Yeah, I mean, I have certain things I can't escape. You know, I can't escape Ligeti. I can't escape Ray Vaughan Williams' Fifth Symphony. I can't escape Dexter Gordon. You know, um, I've been playing standards up in Idlewild with a bass player up there named Marshall Hawkins, wonderful cat. Going to be 81 this month on the 14th. Still going strong. It's beautiful. And Paul Carmen.
Yeah.
And it's one of my favorite things I do. The other band that I'm really sad that no longer plays, we had a nice run there for a few years, was a trio with me and Putter Smith on bass and June Lee singing. And we would do standards and we just never knew which. It was just great. You know, like
I remember
someone came up to Putter after the gig and said, "Do you guys, how does this happen?" He says, "We never play it the same way once."
that. I remember that. Yeah, that was a really cool moment in time.
Yeah, it was just a fun. I mean, you because you had to know the tunes inside and out, but you never played them like they were tunes.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. It was like Picasso, you know.
Right. I miss June. I wish he would like show up even in over online again. Uh, you know,
Yeah, I miss him
oh,
too.
what's going on over there? Over there in Korea,
Yeah,
they ate him up or something.
I don't know. Hope he's
Uh,
okay.
yeah. Joe Goldberger wondering how much Joey uses virtual synths, computer workstations to mock up compositions before the final acoustic recording or performance.
I am a complete Luddite. Let me show you this brass quintet. Here's the first page of it. I write with pencil and paper. I fear computers. They want to steal my Navajo soul. Um, I had this talk with Willis, with Bill Holman several years ago, and he had got a computer program, and he said, and I said, I'm just really weird. I don't do any things. And actually, before I tell you the Willis story, when I played the solo trombone CD for a former student of mine who's now Dr. Worthington, and he's way into electronic music and all the weird stuff they do at San Diego, University of San Diego. He's great. He's one of my favorite people and musicians. After he heard some piece where I had foil on the bill, he says, "You realize people spend hours and hours in the electronic studio trying to recreate that sound." I said, "Hey man, I just put a pie tin on the bell, no problem." But what was the other question that was?
Well, do you
He asked.
mock up before the final acoustic recording or performance?
No, I don't. And one of the luxuries I have, and I preach this to people who are interested in writing. When I was young and I started my 11-piece band, we would rehearse every week on Saturday at the ASU up in Van Room, which I think was 301 up there in Grady Gamage, where the auditorium was. So what I had the luxury of was writing, and I wrote the score and all the parts, and then hearing it right away. So if you write something and you have the luxury of hearing it right away, and then you can, make sure the players are cool and everything, then you get the sound in your head. Now, that doesn't mean that I can hear exactly what I'm writing. There's another great story about that by Billy Byers. But when I moved to Los Angeles, we rehearsed every Thursday after or right before Bill Holman's big band in the same room for, I think, 3, maybe 4 years before we even did a gig. Everyone just wanted to see what was going on with the music. And every week I pretty much wrote a new piece, because I had my day gig at that time was at Disneyland playing in a band there. So I had I had Thursdays and Fridays off. And so, no, it must have been different. We rehearsed on Thursdays. So I must have had Tuesdays and Wednesdays off, and would write, stay up all night the night before the rehearsal, writing out the parts with pencil and paper. And Jerry Penner, who's been in the band for a long time, says, now I have people copy the music on a computer program for me. And Jerry says, I miss the pencil. He likes the pencil, even though it's not as clean. There's spirit involved in these things. Like the Navajos put the pebbles from some woman who's a chatterbox into the drums, so it'll, and the Ghanaians, so the drum will speak.
Yeah.
The animism. I think there's something about the lead. And Willis said to me, he said, you know what? There's too much of a connection between my heart and my hand. And that's how I feel.
That's really nice.
You also want to know the computer. I see this with my students all the time, man. They don't know what they're writing. They can't hear the sound. You want to be able to hear the sound as best you can when you're putting the pencil to the paper. You know what I'm saying? You don't want the computer. The computer is making everybody its bitch instead of the other way around, man. The computer is going to suck your Navajo soul out if you let it. You can use it to your advantage. I'm not an anti-computer guy,
Yeah.
even though I'm horrible with them. I know it can be a valuable tool, but you got to be careful that it's not controlling you.
Yeah.
Every time I see these students, man, the computer is completely controlling them. They're not controlling the computer. Billy Byers was a great writer, and he was a ghostwriter. He did a lot of ghostwriting for Quincy Jones. And someone went up to him one time, and he'd been writing for years. He was older than I am now, and said, Mr. Byers, it must be so wonderful to just write something and know exactly how it's going to sound. And he said, kid, you never know how it's going to sound. I mean, that's part of the beauty of it too, man. You want to do the best you can to know what this is. That's why I write transposed scores. Because if you're writing an alto part, you're not going to feel it or hear it in the right way, in my estimation. I mean, Duke Ellington wrote concert scores. I think he knew what Johnny Hodges was going to sound like. I'm not saying that. I'm saying for me, I want to see what the thing is. I think that's really important. There's also a great Billy Byers story where he was with, maybe it was the Juggernaut Band, or I can't remember which big band he was with, but they were like in Ohio or Iowa or something. And, he did a lot of ghostwriting for Quincy Jones back in the day in the 50s and 60s, and ghostwriting is like when Quincy gets the credit and all the money and the ghostwriter just gets pittance for doing the actual work. So Billy, he was a trombone player. He was great. And part of the deal was after the concert, they had to go to where the money people were that funded the concert. You're obligated to hang out. Not that you wouldn't want to necessarily, and so this woman, elderly woman, bejeweled in this pearl necklace, comes up and says, "Oh, Mr. Byers, I understand you know a very dear friend of mine in Hollywood." And he said, "Who's that, miss?" And she said, "Quincy Jones." And he said, "Lady, I am Quincy Jones."
That's funny.
Yeah, I love that story.
There you go. Hey, I just remembered Paul Jost had made a comment about Frank Rossellino, which was kind of cool. Paul Jost, do you know Paul?
Peripherally.
He's such a great singer. Frank was on the old Steve Allen show with Frank Capp, Terry Gibbs Band. I remember him singing just a wonderful version of "I Cover the Waterfront." That would be nice. That would be fun to go see.
Yeah, all those guys, man, the work was plentiful, at that time. And those TV shows were highly coveted gigs.
Yeah. You have, correct me if I'm wrong, you have a project with a singer, right? Like a classical kind of new age, not new age, classical new music singer.
Yeah, I think I wrote a composition for a former student of ours that is on the recording that we did for the Saddleback College Composers recording.
Okay, you probably sent it to me, right? And then
I may have, but it's not necessarily a working band. And she was a wonderful vocalist named Amanda Strader. She taught both of our kids voice for a while, and she was a great student of Dr. Farthing's here at the college. This is over a decade ago, I imagine.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to write a piece for trombone and voice. I had never done it, and she could sing a low E flat and a high C, so she had a really wide range. And I thought we'd just exploit this, So we performed it a couple of times. I know Jim Miller had one of his students perform it on a recital at Cal Arts. The joke is whenever people see the piece, they're like, the only reason you wrote it is because trombone. That's the only way trombone players going to get a date or be around a female. If they have to rehearse the piece.
I was thinking I was confusing it with, but I did hear your version. But I'm trying to remember Mark, the bass player from San Diego, who's more of an abstract musician. Mark, he's really like fabulous. I'm sure.
Mark Dresser.
Yeah, Mark Dresser.
Mark Dresser. Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah.
So he has a project with a singer, at least one project that's really great, similar to what you wrote. Really beautiful.
Yeah, Dresser's he's a bad boy, man.
Yeah.
We know each other pretty well, but we don't often get to work together. But we did a concert at the college one time with he and myself and Billy Mintz, and it's still one of my favorite memories. Something else.
Billy
I mean, Billy's doing good. I saw him back in February. We went out there to visit my son in Staten Island, and we had dinner with him. He's doing good, man. He's one of my heroes, my favorite people.
When we were young, when we were in our 20s, he used to do, he probably still does stuff like this, but he used to have this gig, I think it was in San Diego, and he invited any bass player who would show up and maybe a few other players. And then he would have like 20 bass players there, and he would have a piece of paper, and it gave like 1 through 10, and like number 1 was play as fast as you can and B, and then he would just yell out the numbers, and those were the charts.
Yeah. Right, and that sort of mutated into a thing he started out here that's still going to New York called the 2 Bass Band.
Oh.
And Yeah, that was fun band. It was just a riot, man. It was just a riot. He's one of my favorite musicians in the entire world.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have long blood together from the old days.
Yeah.
You know what? Those things are pretty short. That piece I wrote for the vocalist. I wonder if we could find that online. I don't
Okay.
even know if it's online.
Let's
I
see.
mean, I just have the CD of it because I'm old fashioned.
Yeah, let me look. What would I call it?
Let's see, 5 love songs. Or if we do Joey Seller's topic, maybe it'll come up 5 love songs. Let's see. There it is. The silvery one with the dude.
Right here. Oh, here.
Yeah.
The
Let's
Fullerton
see.
Jazz?
I'm trying to figure. Let's see which one would be good to listen to. That looks like the first and the third movements. Nope, not that one.
Not that one?
Not that one.
Oh, shit. Wow, you're doing like. Oh, this is a short one. It's 157.
Yeah. Bruce had asked me to do this for one of the solo things.
We don't want to hear that one?
No, well, not right now. I don't know. I mean,
Okay, well,
if you guys wanted, I'm happy.
I'll continue looking.
The one below that is the first, that's 51 seconds. So,
Wishing.
yeah, let's do that one.
March of the Imbeciles by Joey Sellers. That was 12 years ago.
Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus now bundled together. The greatest stories and characters.
God, that was
Yeah,
great.
so that one cracks me up because the first line is wishing you were here and the last line is wishing you were dead. It's a pretty quick emotional spin. If you don't mind, let's do I Want You over on the right there.
Oh, yeah.
So this is this series of songs I wrote for this.
You want me, you want me, you want me in your tank. You need me, I must be taken straight. Why must you always look so sad? I need to put you in my bag. You need to kiss my sad boy. I want you, I need you, you make me contestant. Why can't you love me like a dog? He wants me, I need him, he wants me. Wishing you were here, my love. Wishing you were in my arms. And though you never kiss my hand or lips or eyes, I want you to want me. You want me to want you. I need you to need me. I want you to want you. I need you to need me. You need me. I want you. I need you. You want me. You need me. You want me, you want me, you want me in your tank. You need me, I must be taken straight. Why must you always look so sad? I need to put you in my bag. You need to kiss my sad boy. I want you, I need you, you make me
Is it,
Yeah, yeah.
you make me want to spit?
Yep.
And what the you I want you in my bag. I want you in my tat. I want you in my.
I can't remember what the lyrics are. Yeah, what I noticed there is the balance is way up. The trombone needs to be about 50% quieter, man. I never noticed that before as I drag. I'm not going to remaster it.
Well, it could be maybe I don't know. Maybe it's what I'm playing it through too. I'm not sure.
Oh, maybe. Well, yeah, let's hope. Hard to hear the words. Yeah,
Hey,
that was a fun project for me because I never, I since then I wrote another piece for female vocalist and piano, a regular instrument. And Dr. Farthing said that he could never have a student sing it because of the fourth movement. It's a cross between Schumann and Amy Schumer, and the last line is I won because I have you inside of me. And Scott said I can't have my students sing that. So we have a PG version.
that's funny.
Yeah.
Um, Speaking of good people and musicians, Jamie Rosen is saying hello.
All right,
Hmm.
Jamie.
Jamie. He played on one of my records. He played on the Jazz Chamber. I think he's a great player.
Yeah,
Yeah,
killing.
yeah. Um, what, what was a record that you wore out growing up? That you wore out and you had to replace?
Um, a couple of Dexter Gordon ones and Go, Slide Hampton. There was a live. I can't even remember what it was, but I remember this one solo. It was Slide Hampton solo on Fried Bananas. It seemed like it was written for an 8-piece group. It was from a live jazz festival somewhere. I think the needle actually went through the wax at some point, because I was trying to cop this solo. Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah, real straight ahead stuff. And my musical knowledge is very limited. Man, I'm very stupid about popular music. And I was born in 62 and I had 3 older siblings. And my sisters had like some, pop music. And I don't know, it was largely just jazz and classical around that I listened to. I don't know what happened,
Yeah.
I feel like it's a big black hole in my musical knowledge.
Did you say that trombone was your first instrument?
Yeah, when we grew up, we had really good music education system in Tempe, Arizona at that time, and I was
Yeah.
born in '62. So when you were in the 5th grade, you could pick an instrument, and my mom was a musician, and one of my older sisters was a musician, Jackie. And when it was the day before I was to choose my instrument, Jackie came up to me and said, "Tomorrow you get to pick your instrument. You're going to pick trombone." I said, "Okay."
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
You know what they say, that you don't pick the instrument picks you.
Yeah. I actually wanted to play violin, and my mother said, "You have the perfect lips for flute." So it's funny too, because one day I was going through some kind of spiritual growth. It was just one of those times, and I was driving, and I heard this violin piece on the radio, and I started doing this as I was driving, and I totally felt the presence of the violin. So I thought, oh, maybe I already played violin once. So
Could be.
yeah, but
Very possible.
maybe I was just drawn to it. But it was probably a lot easier to listen to flute being practiced than a violin in my house.
That may be a factor too. It was pretty noisy around our house. It's pretty noisy around our house now when my son was home. It's pretty noisy around here. I'm practicing, my wife's playing clarinet, and Benny's in there doing his singer-songwriter thing. So
Oh gosh,
yeah,
really?
he's
Wow.
he's off to an amusement park gig in Ohio right now. It's at
Oh,
Cedar Point, so we're hoping he'll stay safe
oh,
playing in a country band.
yeah.
Yeah.
What's happening in your life right now?
It's interesting. Everyone's talking about how much time they have, and I don't have any time at all. I need to finish this brass quintet for this record these guys are doing probably by the end of this month. I'm I'm co-chair of the music department at Saddleback, so I have a lot of work to do to get classes online. Today, I just submitted all the online addendum to the curriculum committee for about 50 classes that I had to get in today. And I am also developing a new 8-week online class on world music, which is a field in which I am not an expert. So the learning curve is pretty deep. So every day I'm either taking care of administrative stuff or working on this class and trying to get the other classes online too. Jamie and I just talked yesterday. Jamie's going to help me co-teach the improv class, which I normally, when it's in person, just do. But Jamie is younger than I am and has better computer skills and technology skills. And also, we had to take him off the combo class, and I'm just trying to keep everyone's as employed as we can, you know.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah.
And
In terms of playing, it's interesting. We're doing concerts in our front yard every Thursday.
oh,
I know everyone's in a dither because we opened up too soon, but I think we're pretty safe here. I'm about 5 yards, not feet, from everybody. Me, trombone, guitar, and piano, and the neighbors come out, sit on the sidewalk in the first part of the street. Everyone's wearing a mask, pretty socially distanced. We just did a gig up in Idlewild with Marshall and Paul on Tuesday.
oh,
Everyone was wearing their masks, but that's such a close-knit community that people weren't so much following the rules toward the end of the night after the booze starts flowing. I have an open rehearsal every Saturday with Clatworthy and a crew, with Ron Stout, some youngsters. We do outdoor in his backyard. And I think we're everyone's being pretty cool about it. So I don't feel nervous about the Rona or anything. And it feels good to play, and it feels good to play with other people. I just wish I could play indoors. I'm tired of my sound outdoors.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I did, let's see, I did an outdoor hang with Chuck Manning and Ashley Marr. So, uh, yeah, we just improvised, but it was really
Did
fun.
you feel safe?
Yeah, yeah. It was
Okay.
outdoor.
That's the thing, man. Like when we're doing the gig in Idlewild, my wife was with me. She's like, look at these knuckleheads, you know? And it's because that's such a tight knit community. Everyone feels like family, you know, and they all love each other, and, you know, but I mean, the virus doesn't care, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of crazy times, isn't it?
Yeah. You know, I feel a great sense of gratitude that I'm in a position with the teaching gig
Yeah,
that it's solid bread wise, and I don't have to worry like some of my dear friends do, you know, what's going to happen when the unemployment thing goes south at the end of this month. So I don't take that lightly. I think it's really important to acknowledge and honor the gratitude that everyone should feel for whatever they have. And I'm certainly in the fortunate position in that regard.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Let's see. I wanted to ask you something at last. What was it, Joey?
I don't know. I wish I did.
Me
I
too.
was thinking, I was thinking, I haven't thought about that piece for trombone and voice in a long time. And I think I'm actually going to listen to it. I normally don't listen to my own stuff, but I can't remember like why I wrote something. So it's called 5 songs, but there's 6 movements because the first and 6th movement are the same song, I think. That's why I need to listen to it. I can't remember. It was over 10 years ago, I'm sure.
It's really cool. Sounds great. Do you ever work with Bevan Manson?
No. Mm-mm.
Seems like you guys would be uh, a good, good musical relationship.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I was just thinking about Dutz the other day because did he open up Sunspace again?
He did have a few groups there, but I haven't received any email about more. There were 2 nights.
Right. Okay.
I think one night he played with Bernie Dressel, and I don't know if they were actually letting people in, because it's so small. Um,
Right.
and but uh, they were definitely doing online.
Right. Doing
I don't
something
really
to
know if
broadcast.
yeah, yeah. Um,
It's funny because his series is on Thursday night, and I'm doing these little house concerts here on Thursday, so I can never make it anyhow. So
oh,
on online would be better. I could see it after the fact.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I know what I wanted to ask you. Just curious, what do you think of the future of selling CDs?
I'm probably the wrong person to ask since I don't think about life in those terms very much. I'm horrible at marketing. I'm horrible at understanding technology. I think it's more likely that vinyl will come back rather than CDs moving forward. Is what my gut tells me. But I'm so unplugged into that part of the music life. You know, I never troubleshoot the technology of the future because for me I'm, for better or worse, I'm pretty much always concentrating on the art of it. You can kill yourself worrying about those external things. There's enough for me to concern myself with just dealing with becoming a better trombone player and musician, you know, composer. I just focus everything inwardly. When I need to record the trio with Kendall and Trey. We're overdue, and yeah, so I'll have to cross that bridge and say, are we going to make CDs or not? I have no idea.
I know
I like the physical
Brad's-
part of a CD, and I like the books.
I do too.
You know?
Brad makes a lot of CDs, you know, and
Yeah.
basically he gives them away. And I've often said this. I mean, I have a lot of CDs in my garage, which I don't want to throw out because just really basically because I go to Japan and I can sell them in Japan. And usually it's, you know, a nice little taste from traveling to Japan. So
Nice, good. Yeah, mine are sentimental. All the vinyl and the CDs I should throw out, you know, but it's kind of sentimental too. You know, I
yeah,
just don't want to get rid of them.
yeah, yeah. Well, you know, I want to eke out a few more minutes, but let's see. So, trying to think if there's anything really on my mind that I haven't asked you. It's fun to talk to you, and I feel like there's a lot more depth that I could, you know, jump into, but I'm not sure what it is.
Well, I mean, yeah, don't need to worry about the depth. I mean, you know, one of the things about our community in the jazz world, and probably any community, maybe biochemists have the same thing where they're full of biochemist stories. But I mean, I always think when we get off on these tangents and launch into the stories about weird things that have happened, and you know, it's one I've realizing as I get older. It's especially when I'm around the younger kids, they want to hear the stories, you know, about what's going on and stuff. And I feel like I've been very fortunate to have had some experiences that other people just would not have had, and completely fortuitous, not by anything I did, you know, to deserve it. So again, the gratitude, you know, I mean, before I graduated from college, we got that gig at Disneyland, you know, so I was commuting from Tempe, Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport to Ontario, California, and then getting in Benny's 62 Buick, all six of us, and going to work at Disneyland on the weekend, and then going back and going to school.
Oh my
And it
God.
was crazy, you know, and it opened up a lot of doors that may not have been opened up otherwise. I mean, the first being that I completely got my ass kicked because the band that they had just fired and that we had replaced was the Jazz Miners that had Andy Martin and John Allred as the trombone players. So, I mean, it was wonderful coming to this part of the country because it was instant humiliation and realizing how much work there was to be done, you know. And that band, you know, we formed that band in college. So it's an interesting thing, you know. I mean, there's experiences I had in that band that I don't think many people have had, like seeing the drummer play a snare drum with his penis. You know, I don't know how many people have that luxury.
How many?
And what a weird sound that makes. That's a very peculiar sound too.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Kevin Van Den Elzen.
Kevin, does Kevin want to demonstrate playing a snare drum with his penis? He's a good drummer.
I don't know, Kevin. What about it? We'll see what he says. First, he just
Yeah,
said Joey, but you know. Oh
yeah.
yeah.
What was happening is we were playing the very first Scottsdale Jazz Festival. I was with this band, and we needed to be mobile, so we had a tuba player, and it was a trad band. It was like a Dixieland band, and the drummer had a snare drum and cymbal, so we could go from one place to the other. What was 8:30 in the morning, and the leader of the band wanted us to start our set, but there was no audience there. We were behind a backstop at the baseball diamond in Scottsdale Community College, and it was early, and everyone was grumpy, and the leader, and rightfully so, was like, we signed a contract, and the drummer was like, there's no one here, man. You know, if a tree falls in the forest, you know, why are we going to honor the contract if there's no audience? And so Rob, the leader, counted off a tune, and we didn't hear any drums for the first little part of it, and then to make a point that there was no people, that's why Rob played the snare drum with his penis. He was trying to make a point. Look, there's nobody here. I can, no one's going to care. So that was how that came about. It was a very excellent way to make that point, I thought.
Very excellent. Yeah, I haven't heard too many penis stories, but my friend Andy McIntosh, who was a great alto player, he was in a band playing behind Shirley Bassey, who apparently wasn't really charming to musicians. And so it was a regular gig, and she would come out, and she had like a glass of water on a little stand and everything. So one day, the whole band kind of got around the, like they kind of, I don't know how they did this, but they got around the water thing, and Andy took out his penis and he stirred the water with his penis. And then, they went to play, and they were all giggling, when she was drinking water, which of course she didn't know why. But that's, treat the musicians well.
Yeah, well, there's that. That seems like that's crossing the line, but I still like the irreverence of it. I'm not going to name names, but in the Phoenix Symphony, this bass trombone player was a tremendous player. Obviously at times in the symphony, if the conductor wants the trombones to play loud, they're going to play loud. And the trombones are usually set up just behind the viola section, So there was this one viola player who would always just look around, when they played loud, like she was bugged for her sensitive little ears.
Right.
And so the bass trombone player knew the thing was coming up. So yeah, he opened up and played as loud as he could. And when she turned around, she never turned around again after that.
Well, yeah, Joe Goldberger goes, watch out for rudimental dysfunction.
Nice.
That's good, Joe.
Nice.
All right, well, Joey Sellers, thank you so much for hanging out. It's really nice of you to give us 2 hours of your time. And
I'm looking to do anything to procrastinate on this work I have to do for this class.
Yeah, maybe this is where you ask people, are you into world music? Maybe you can email me or something.
If you guys got anything to offer, bring it on, baby. I welcome it. Cathy, thank you for inviting me. That's really sweet of you.
You're welcome. And I might play a little of you as we leave. And also, I just want to say tomorrow I thought I'm just going to take the day off. Not that people are going out and partying, but I just figured July 4th, maybe they'll have a barbecue or, And Sunday is Roy McCurdy. And
Nice.
Next week, Laurie Antonioli from San Francisco, singer, Frank Potenza, Katia Morais, Ralph Humphrey, Jennifer Lydham. So, we have a nice time coming up. And after that, actually, Andrea and Ken are coming on too.
Nice.
Yeah.
Keep it up. It's beautiful, Cathy.
Thank you very much.
Keeping people connected and plugged into one another. It's really, really welcome.
Thank you. Thanks. Everybody take good care of yourselves and have a great time. Have a great July 4th and drink a beer for Joey and me.
Sounds good.
Bye, Joey.
Bye-bye.